Go ahead. So my wife's birthday is coming up, and for years we've been trying to get in touch with the artist who made a painting that hung in her room as a child because she loves the painting. And we've had no luck. So let's build one out of steel. Alrighty y'all, we are going to be using a scrap piece of 20 gauge cold rolled for this, and I'm running the gantry back and forth to square the piece up, then marking the top corner so I know the dimensions that I have to work with in my layout. I'm going to cut the parts out. 20 gauge is actually something that I have to turn down the HTP microcut 875 for. Turn it down to about 30 amps and I get a pretty good cut there. But as you see, my consumables are starting to wear and you get these little skip starts. My table doesn't have any sort of like auto stop like some do when that happens, so the cut just keeps running. Normally it's not a problem. Most of the time I can just break the piece out, but the other solution is always to go back and just recut the cut if it's a small one. If it's something bigger, I'll actually start the cut and then manually kill the torch and just let it keep running. That way I keep my zeros and I don't have to worry about anything getting knocked out of square or anything like that. Jump over and you'll see how this is going to go together. Because there's these braided pieces of the grass or reeds in this, it's 6 wedges, and I'm going to grind the backs of all of them here using this magnetic chuck. It is so much of a time saver just to be able to stick a piece down. This is a 6" by 12", and I'm thinking about upgrading to an even bigger one. With those done, I prefer not to grind the face of something if I'm going to be grinding it again later, just so I'm not eating any more metal away. But I quickly realized those braids are going to cover each other, so I need to grind the other side, which pretty much just went like that. Now with the pieces cleaned up, I set about arranging everything and getting the reeds braided together correctly. It's pretty slow going, but in the end it ended up turning out pretty good in my opinion and made the piece pop.
Oh, this is going to take a little while.
The big part was making sure that I didn't accidentally do one of the patterns backward, because that's the sort of thing that would drive me crazy and have me cutting it apart to fix it. Another alternative would have been to cut this as one big piece and then not have the reeds braided, but I wanted that look, so we went with it. I'm going to fire up the ProPulse 220 MTS from HTP. Y'all know I use a lot of their products. I'll have a card right here to my review of the 2 units that I've been using the most, and hopefully you guys can get something from it. They're actually running a deal right now on a competitor trade-in, and they are giving some amazing credits to people that are trading in older machines. I'm not exactly sure how they're making that work in the books, but whatever. But let's just get into the welding. I'm running the machine set to about 040 thickness, a little bit hotter than you'd want to be for 20 gauge, but anything under that, and I find the welds don't penetrate all that well. You'll also see I'm running a longer stick out, because the old axiom of longer stick out equals colder weld is more or less true, even though the 220 MTS is going to compensate for that because of the synergic function. But you'll see the backs of the welds, they're not pretty. And hey, why not follow on Instagram? There will be a link down in the description. Either way, with the front all welded, now I'm going to grind those welds out. And this is the reason I don't really like to grind multiple times, as I was mentioning before, because you're just removing more and more metal, but it's okay. There's a little bit of warpage, and I kind of took most of it out with a hammer, manually bent some of it out, and then went over to a wire brush just to kind of blend out some of the grind marks. I didn't want it to, look like it didn't ground a bunch in the center, but not at the edges. And it still did, so I decided to rough up the edges a little bit, just running a coarse flap disc over them kind of randomly. Again, it's pretty minor, because when we go to paint, it's going to fill in a lot of those dips and valleys. So here we are at paint. I'm using a tan paint plus primer that it's just gonna kind of give us a nice base coat so that when I go over it with gold later, it'll look kind of brassy. And now we'll jump back to the plasma cutter. Got a bit of a scrap pile building up there. I normally give it to Tommy just kind of as a bonus. He can go scrap it and, you know, make $100 or 150 or whatever it works out to. But I was surprised to see that the settings for 20 gauge cold rolled steel are pretty much perfect for 24 ounce copper sheet, which I had some left over from another project. So we cut out the birds. I also cut out one of my weld it yourself rose kits. There's a link to those in the description, and I'll have a card at the end if you guys are interested in any of those kits. Pick one up. They're a pretty fun little project, and you get something cool out the end as well as a bunch of welding practice. Now, unfortunately, copper's not magnetic, so I can't use my grinding chuck to deal with this, so it's a lot of these little magnets and then clamps to just work my way through these birds, and it was slow going. You know, it's, 4 operations, a clamp on either side of either face so that you can grind the other half that isn't clamped. It's slow and it's annoying, and it really makes me love that magnetic chuck for all the other little parts we do. But with those taken care of, I wanted them to be a little bit nicer than the finish from a 60 grit flap disc, so I've got some 480 grit sandpaper here taped down to the table. And even wet sanding, I just couldn't really get a good grip on the copper, but the sandpaper ended up being a really good base, and then I went over them with some of these 3M sanding pads. The fine pads are somewhere around 400 or 500 grit, and they left for a pretty nice finish. With the paint dry from the tan, I'm going to go over again with gold. It's just one of these Rust-Oleum metallic paints. I really don't like using these if I don't have to, but they are a good paint, so what are you going to do? In order to attach the copper birds to the painted steel background, there's a bunch of different options here. What I chose to go with is VHB tape. You'll see there's some black tape and some gray tape. That's the indoor versus the outdoor rated, but this thing's going inside, so I can use either one. And I've ordered them in a bunch of different sizes, so I can use the 1 inch wide for bigger pieces, and then I have all the way down to 1/8 of an inch wide for really small pieces. And as long as you really give a good push to get the VHB attached, it holds pretty well. Now to hang this, we need a nail hole, and there was a little spot from the welding that wasn't perfect, so I just decided to use that. We're going to use some brass nails to put this up, and you don't really see them very much in the end. So I wanted to see how this was going to look on a wall, and the lighting in the paint booth is pretty similar to that at my house, so we just put it up to check it out.
Alrighty, y'all, there it is. I decided I'd go with a gold paint with a tan undertone to get kind of a brassy look, but without it looking too metallic. And then copper for these birds around the outside, because my wife loves the look of copper. Go ahead.
Oh my God. It's beautiful. Thank you.
If you guys want to see a little bit more like this in the future, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to be like these folks over here and support what we're doing, there's Patreon. And of course, if you want to see something YouTube suggests, or no, let's do a sign that my wife built a couple months ago, right there. Until next time, thanks for stopping by.
What?